Okay, so topic 3, orders of operations. The concepts we're going to talk about are PEMDAS, and then we're just going to go through some examples of order of operations. So concept 1, PEMDAS, that just stands for parentheses, exponents, multiply, divide, add, and subtract. Notice that multiply and divide and add and subtract are in the same color block. This means that you don't always do multiplication first. You don't always do addition first. It's whatever comes first when you're reading something from left to right, just like you read a book. So if that division came before the multiplication, you would do the division first. So this is whatever comes first from left to right. And that's talking about this section and this section. Okay. So go ahead and try out that problem there. So let's try this out. What answer do you get? So it's 8 divided by 2, parentheses, 2 plus 2, close parentheses. Give you guys a few seconds to do that. I'm just going to rewrite it off to the side. Okay, once you have your answer, just go ahead and shout it out.
16.
So some are getting 16, some are getting 1. Any other answers? Okay, so those are the two common answers that people do find, either 1 or 16. So let's go ahead and follow the PEMDAS and see what the answer is supposed to be. So PEMDAS, the first thing is parentheses. So do we see parentheses in this problem? Yep, right here. So that means we are going to do those parentheses first. So I have 8 divided by 2, and then in the parentheses, 2 plus 2 is 4. Okay. Do I need these parentheses? Okay, or let me rephrase this. Do these parentheses now represent parentheses in this problem? No, what do they represent?
Multiplication.
Multiplication. So we have 8 divided by 2 times 4. So what's going to come first according to PEMDAS?
Division.
The division, because it's whatever comes first left to right. So 8 divided by 2 is 4. 4 times 4 is 16. Okay, so the correct answer is 16. If you got 1, then I assume you probably divided first and then continued on with the problem. Okay. So let's look at some more examples. In these examples, multiplication is going to be represented by a dot. So this right here, this is multiplication. Okay. So on number 1, we have 7 plus 5 times 2 minus 3 divided by 3. So following PEMDAS, which one comes first? The multiplying. Okay. So we have 7 plus 10, because 5 times 2 is 10, minus 3 divided by 3. After every step, we're rewriting the problem. Okay, now what comes next? Division. So I have 7 plus 10 minus 1. Okay. What comes next? Addition. So I have 17 minus 1, and then I just solved this out to be 16. Writing out all the steps is what's going to help you prevent you from making that mistake. What about number 2? Which is going to come first? The exponents. Good. So we have 4 squared, which is 16. So I'm going to rewrite this whole problem. Oops. What comes next?
Multiplication.
Good, multiplication. So we have 16 minus 15 plus 8 divided by 2. What's next?
Division.
Division. We're just doing this for every problem. So 16 minus 15 plus 4. What comes next?
Subtraction.
Subtraction. Yep, whatever comes first, left to right. So we have 1 plus 4, which gives us 5. Okay. Go ahead and take a moment and try 3. And is this large enough for everyone to see in the back? Okay. Okay, I'm going to start working through it. So what you should have done first is the division. So your first line is 12 minus 3 plus 3 times 4. Then the multiplication. So your next line would be 12 minus 3 plus 12. Then subtraction. 9 plus 12. And you should have got 21. Okay, number 4. What's the first part we're going to do?
Parentheses.
The parentheses. So we have 6 times 5 plus 4. Well, actually, sorry. What are we doing next?
Exponent.
Exponents. I had to recite that PEMDAS in my head real quick. So 6 times 5 plus 16. What are we doing next? Multiplication. So 30 plus 16, which gives us 46. Okay. So remember, when we are doing order of operations, we are not going to have any variables to deal with. Variables as in something you have to solve, okay? So on number 5, it looks like we might distribute this, okay? But since we are not dealing with a problem that has any of those variables, we're still following PEMDAS. So knowing that, what is going to come first?
Parentheses.
Parentheses. So we're just going to add 4 plus 2. So we have 3. And what's the operation between 3 and that new number 6?
Multiplication.
Multiplication. Okay. So what comes next? Multiply. So we have 18 minus 5, which gives us 13. Okay, go ahead and take a minute and try number 6. You're going to get a decimal answer, so don't let that make you feel wrong. You're going to get a decimal. Morning. We're working on topic 3, order of operations. Okay, as you're working through the steps, I'm going to go ahead and start. So the first thing you should have done is to simplify both parentheses. In doing that, we get 2 to the 5th power minus 3 times 3 divided by 5. Then you should have saw the exponent. 2 to the 5th power is 32. So 32 minus 3 times 3 divided by 5 would be your next line. Okay. Then you would have done the multiplication next. So 32 minus 9 divided by 5. And then lastly, this division, 9 divided by 5, gives us the decimal 1.8. So 32 minus 1.8, which gives us 30.2. Any questions on anything so far? Okay. Okay, now let's look at number 7. So looking through number 7, what are we going to do first?
Parentheses.
Good, all the parentheses. So we have 3 parentheses that we're going to simplify first. So 6 minus 2, 4. 4 plus 1, 5. What's the operation between 4 and 5?
Multiplication.
Multiplication. Okay, then minus that 3 squared. Square root 16 plus 9 is 25. Okay, we got rid of all our parentheses. What's next? Exponents. So 5 squared and 3 squared. So we have 4 times 25 minus 9, square root of 25. Okay. What's our next step?
Multiplication.
Multiplication. Do we have 1 or 2 multiplications to complete?
1.
2.
So we technically have 2 because what's the operation between 9 and that square root?
9 times the square root of 25.
Yeah, right here. So we have this multiplication and this multiplication. Before we can multiply 9 times the square root of 25, what is the square root of 25? 5. So I'm reducing that to 5. So technically we're multiplying 9 times 5 in that part. Okay, so then we should get 100 minus 45, which gives us 55. We could have technically simplified that square root of 25 once we simplified this part right here in the problem, that 16 plus 9, and then saw that it turned into 25. We could have just right there said, okay, square root of 25 is 5. Okay, so we could have done that one step earlier.
So what, at that point it would have been minus 3 squared times 5?
Yes.
Okay.
Mhm. But for now, I'm just writing out everything step by step by step. But as you are going through their homework and doing these problems more, you're going to get the hang of it, and you could just do that in a prior step. Okay. Now on number 8, what are we going to do first?
Parentheses.
Good, parentheses. So we have 3 of those parentheses to deal with. In this second parenthesis, before I can simplify it, what do I need to do first? So in that 6 squared minus 3. Good, I have to do that exponent. Okay, what is 6 squared? 36. So I'm just going to cross that out and write 36 before I simplify the rest of my parentheses. Okay, so I have 3/4 times 7 times 33 minus 8 times 3. So all I did was simplify my parentheses. Okay. What is my what is my next step?
Multiplication.
Multiplication. So I'm going to go ahead and first multiply this one out because I'm going to have to turn that 7 into a fraction in order to multiply this and keep our fractions for now. So in order to do that, this 7 becomes 7 over 1. And then when I multiply fractions, what do I do with the numerators and the denominators? if we just multiply across. So this becomes 21 over 4 times 33 minus 8 times 3. Okay? Now I'm going to do the same thing. So what would be my next multiplication that I would deal with? This first one or this second one? First one. Let's just go ahead and continue doing that first one. So that means I'm going to have to turn 33 into a fraction, and I do that by writing what in the denominator? A 1, and then I multiply across. So 21 times 33, 693 over 4, minus 8 times 3. Now I can do this last multiplication. And I get 692 over 4 minus 24. Here I'm just going to go ahead and turn that into, or wait a minute, was it 692 or 693?
You said 3, but you wrote 2.
Okay, thank you. I know, I was looking back at my calculator and I was like, I had a 3 there. 693. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and turn that 693 over 4 into a fraction. I get 173.25 minus 24, which is 149.25.
Question,
Mhm.
if you don't mind. In this situation, are you able to turn that 24 into a fraction and subtract that way? You get the
Yes.
same answer.
Yes, you get the same answer. So if you turn 24 into a fraction, you wrote that over 1, you'd have to get a common denominator, and you would get the same answer. So if the question specifically doesn't ask for fraction or decimal, and you give me a fraction, but my answer is in decimal form, I'll just switch it up and see if you got the right fraction, and it'd be correct. So either way.
So you could technically do it from the start. You could do like 0.75.
Correct, you could. The only reason I didn't start with that 0.75 in the beginning is sometimes when we're dealing with fractions and they turn into decimals, we're just going to get even larger decimal, and sometimes it's not going to be that exact 0.25 at the end. Maybe it will be 0.2498, you know what I mean? This is just to make sure I got that as accurate as possible. But yeah, either way, usually I will have you round it to 2 decimal places anyway, so you should get that 0.25. Okay. Okay, go ahead and take a moment and start working on 9. Your answer for 9 is going to be a decimal. Okay, so start writing it out step by step. And then in about 30 to 40 seconds, I'm going to start going through my steps. Okay, I'm going to start going through my steps. So the first thing you should have done was simplify this parenthesis here. So we have 1/2 cubed divided by 2 squared plus 3 times 4/3 squared minus the square root of 64 minus 25 is 39. Then you should have went through and done all of your exponents. So when we have a fraction raised to a power of an exponent, that exponent goes to the numerator and the denominator. So this becomes 1 cubed over 2 cubed divided by 4 plus 3 times 4 squared over 3 squared minus the square root of 39. Okay, just wrote out that extra step so you could see where that exponent was going. And then continuing to simplify these exponents, we get 1 over 8 divided by 4 plus 3 times 16 over 9 minus the square root of 39.
How did you get 1 over 8? I'm sorry.
Because 1 cubed is 1 and 2 cubed is 8. Why haven't I simplified my square root yet? Is the square root of 39 a perfect square? No. So it's going to give me some decimal answer, so I'm going to save that towards the end. Okay, from here, I'm just going to go ahead and turn these fractions into decimals. So 1/8 is 0.125 divided by 4 plus 3 times 16 divided by 9 is 1.78. So this is the part in the problem where I'm talking about, like, this is where we're starting to round. And sometimes when you round too early, you're not going to get the exact answer at the end. So I'm choosing to turn these into decimals on my, what is this, my 4th step. Excuse me. But I'm going to keep that square root of 39 for now. Okay, then the next thing you should have done is the division. So 0.125 divided by 4. See, now we're getting these long decimals. 0.03125. I'm not going to simplify that to see, because again, I want my answer at the end to be the most accurate as possible, so I wrote all the decimal places. Okay, then you should have done the multiplication. So this is plus 3 times 1.78, 5.34. Minus the square root of 39. Okay. I'm going to add these decimals together. And I get 5.37125. Again, I'm keeping as many decimals as possible. And then I'm going to go ahead and turn that square root of 39 into a decimal now. And since I wrote 5 decimal places for my number previously, I'm going to go ahead and write 5 decimal places for that square root of 39. So 6.244, let's see, 10, because of that 997. Now subtracting these, we get 5.37125 minus 6.24410, which is negative 0.87. And I'm going to round to 2 decimal places for my final answer.
How off would it be if you didn't do 5 spaces on that 6.24?
Not by much. It wouldn't be off like a crazy amount. So if I just did 6.24. Okay. If I just rounded this part right here to 6.24, I would get negative 0.868, which would turn that into 0.87 because we're rounding to 2 decimal places. But let's say the problem is asking you to round to 3 decimal places. You would get negative 0.869 versus negative 0.870. So again, I'm not going to be marking you off for those little tiny errors there. Yes?
Wouldn't that be 6.25 instead of 6.24410?
Did I do that wrong? 6.25? 1 second. 6.25. Yes, if I was rounding, oh yeah, because that turns 0, 0, 0. Yeah, this would be 500. But we're still going to get that negative 0.87. Okay. Number 10, what are we doing first? Parentheses, so we have 5 minus 3 plus 72 times 8. What's next? Multiplication. So 5 minus 3 plus 576. Which part next? Subtraction. So we get 2 plus 576, which is 578. Okay. Let's look at 11. Notice on 11 we have parentheses inside of other parentheses. So when we have a parenthesis inside of a parenthesis, which parenthesis do you think we're going to do first? The inside or the outside?
The inside.
The inside. So we're going to do those parentheses. So this 3 minus 6 and this 1 minus 4. So I have 2 plus 2 times negative 3. I'm putting that negative 3 in parentheses so we don't confuse that negative for a minus. And then minus 1 plus negative 3 squared. Okay. What would be our next step?
The exponents.
Yes, so we have to complete this exponent right here before we can complete that outside parenthesis. So what's negative 3 squared?
9.
Perfect, 9. Positive 9, because negative times a negative is positive. So then we would have 2 plus 2 times negative 3 minus parentheses 1 plus 9 squared. Okay. What's next?
Parentheses.
Good. Parentheses, and then we'll do that exponent with it, since that's the last exponent. So 2 plus 2 times negative 3 minus 8 squared. What's 8 squared? Or sorry, not 8 squared.
That's 10 squared.
10 squared. 1 plus 9, 10 squared, which is what number? 100. Good. Okay, next step. Multiplication right here, that 2 times negative 3. So 2, and it's going to be minus 6 because 2 times negative 3 gives us a negative 6. So we wouldn't write plus negative 6. We would just write negative 6 minus 6. Minus 100. Okay. Next part here, that 2 minus 6. What's 2 minus 6? Negative 4 minus 100, which gives us our total answer of
Negative 104.
negative 104. They're both negatives. That means we add them together, and our answer is negative. Okay. Number 12, what would we do first?
The exponents.
Good, the exponents, because we have no parentheses here, so we're going to skip straight to the exponents. So 5 squared and 3 squared. So I have the square root of 25 minus 9. What would I do next? Subtract. 25 minus 9 gives us the square root of 16, which is 4. Okay, number 13, we have now this large fraction. So we have a numerator and we have a denominator. When we're dealing with PEMDAS, we're going to treat our numerator and our denominator like two separate problems. Okay, so looking at our numerator, what are we going to do first? Parentheses. Inside of the first parentheses, what are we going to do first? Multiplication. So we got to make sure we're doing this multiplication first. So 3 times 2 is 6. Then I can continue with my parentheses. So I have 4 plus 6, which is 10. And then plus 3 times negative 1, which is going to give us minus 3. Okay? Because plus a negative number is the same as subtracting that number over negative 1 squared. Okay? Now let's look at our denominator. What would we be doing in the denominator? The exponent. Would we be doing negative 1 squared or 1 squared? 1 squared. Because that negative 1 is not in parentheses, this square only goes to that 1. So we would have 10 minus 3 over negative 1. Simplifying the top, what do we have? 7 over negative 1, which we could write as what? Negative 7. Okay, lastly for number 14, again we have a numerator and a denominator, so we're going to treat them each separately in the beginning and then combine our answers at the end. One thing that we have in this problem that we haven't had in the other problems is this. What is this called? Those bars. Starts with A, yep. Absolute value bars. What do absolute value bars do? Good. So let me write that off. So the absolute value, which is those 2 bars, makes answer always positive. So you could think of it as this. If we have a negative number inside of those absolute value bars, it's going to chop off that negative. Okay, it's always going to be positive.
So would that make it 4 plus 8?
So we would still simplify this. We would still do 4 minus 8, which would give us negative 4. But instead of our answer being negative 4, it would be a positive 4. Yes. When we're talking about PEMDAS, how would we, in what place would we simplify absolute value? With the parentheses. So when we see parentheses and we see absolute value, we're going to treat that as the same thing when we're talking about order of operations. So in the numerator, we're going to simplify this absolute value of 4 minus 8. And in the denominator, we're going to simplify that 5 plus 4 squared. Okay, so I have 3/5 plus 1/3 times positive 4. Because 4 minus 8 is negative 4, absolute value makes it positive, so times 4, minus 9 squared. And then on the bottom, 2 cubed minus 2 times, what do we have to do first in that parenthesis? exponent. So we have 16 plus 5, which is 21. So times 21. Okay. This is now our new problem here. What are we going to be doing next? Exponent. So we have an exponent on the numerator and on the denominator. So we're treating those still separate. So we have 3 over 5 plus 1 over 3 times 4 minus 81 over 8 minus 2 times 21. Okay. What's our next step?
Multiplication.
Multiplication. So we have a multiplication at the top and right here at the bottom. So when we are multiplying 1/3 times 4, what do we need to do with that 4? Put it over 1. So if I multiply 1/3 times 4 over 1, that gives me
4 over 3.
4 over 3. So I have 3 over 5 plus 4 over 3 minus 81 over 8 minus 42. Okay. What is my next step on the top? Yep, addition. I'm going to go ahead and just type that into my calculator. So at this point, I'm turning them into decimals. So 3/5 gives us 0.6, and 4/3 gives us 1.33, rounding that here. So if I'm adding that, I get 1.93 minus 81 over 8 minus 42. And then now I'm just simplifying top and bottom, so just subtraction. Negative 79.07, just rounding 2 decimal places. And then on the bottom, negative 34. Okay, now I have a regular fraction. Once I have simplified my numerator and my denominator, then I'm going to just treat this as a fraction, type it in my calculator, and see what it's going to simplify to. So I have 79.07 negative divided by negative 34, and that gives me 2.33, just rounding to 2 decimal places. Okay. And that concludes the notes for order of operations. If you go to the bottom of these notes, there's a link to some extra practice. If you want to, let's say you've gone through the homework, you need extra practice on top of the homework, you could follow that link there.